there's a couple of things that the Division of Real Estate wants me to make sure to talk to you guys about. So that's what we're going to start with, is we're going to start with that. Now, here's where I want to start with in that is I'm going to ask you guys a question, and I want either in-person people or the online can answer. But what is the difference between an appraisal versus a CMA? What's the difference?
The appraisal is legit because it's coming from the appraiser.
Okay, so Marissa's saying it's the appraisal is legit because it's coming from the appraiser. Okay, what other thoughts? Some of the online people, what do you got?
The appraisal is the one that's taken into consideration on the loan, not the CMA.
Okay, good. That's true. Good.
The appraisal works backwards and the CMA works forwards.
Okay, so say more about what you mean by that. So let me make sure you guys online heard. He's saying that the appraisal looks backwards, the CMA is looking forward. So what do you mean by that?
So the appraisal is going to look at what's sold in the last 90 days and try and justify your price for that. Whereas the CMA, you're projecting what is your house going to sell for in the current market with where things are going.
Good, I like that. Yeah, that's good. You must have had a good teacher to talk about.
Yeah, Dave's been great.
Yeah, ouch. All right. Yeah, good. So now let me ask you this. So I'm going to build on what Marissa said, which was the appraisal is legit. So which one is more reliable or more trustworthy? Those kind of things.
Totally biased, but the CMA is going to be more reliable and trustworthy.
Okay.
In my opinion, it will not be my CMA. The appraisal is going to be way more accurate than my CMAs.
And why? Why would you?
I don't know, because maybe I want to add an extra 20 grand for that extra third car garage.
Okay, good.
Maybe
Okay.
I'm not calculating it correctly.
Okay, good. I like what you're saying there, because that is, so we'll say more about that in a minute. In fact, just make sure you guys online heard, she was saying that she probably is going to be a little more biased and add a little bit more value potentially to the house, right? So for me, here's what I would say is keep in mind that in terms of the general public, meaning that as we're dealing with the public, when they hear that an appraiser said X, the public is going to rely and put a lot more weight on that appraisal. Even though I personally feel like we as agents are better at valuing properties than what an appraiser is. And the reason I say that, it goes to what Douglas was saying, which is that an appraiser does a really good job at looking at the past, of saying, hey, if your home would have been on the market in the last 6 months or 90 days, whatever, this is where the value was. But are our home prices today the same as they were 6 months ago? No, not even really remotely close to some extent. And so because of that, that's where I would just say, I personally feel like the value that we are going to put on a property is more accurate than the value that an appraiser goes in and puts on that property, because we are more involved in what is currently going on the market. They're pretty good at looking at what happened, what it was. And so just kind of keep in mind that that's kind of the difference, but also keeping in mind that the public, in their mind though, when they hear, oh, an appraiser said it's worth X, they now rely on that. Okay. So let me give you a quick example of this. I have a neighbor that is an appraiser, and what? So, well, I'm not going to repeat that for the people that are online. So see, you miss when you guys don't come live to class, you miss out on the good stuff.
Tell me I'm wrong. Notice how he hasn't refuted what I said.
I have not refuted what he said. All right. So
Did you hear what I said?
No, I missed the MMA class.
I said he's an a-hole.
Thank you.
he's really not, but
He's a nice guy.
in this
When it
scenario,
comes to this thing that we're about
yeah,
to
in
talk
this
about,
scenario that I'm going to tell you about, that is correct. All right. So anyway, what?
And I love this guy.
We're having a little too much fun in class today. So you guys are missing out by not being here. All right. So I haven't. So I'm going to tell you about two different neighbors. So and the funny thing is they actually live on the same street. But I got a call from a neighbor who said his mom had died. That's not the funny part, by the way. So I'm teasing. Yeah, we better start over. So he calls me and says that his mom died and he wants me to help him get her property sold. And I said, great, let's go meet out at the property. We'll take a look at it. I'll put together a market analysis. Now, so we go out to look at the property. And for you guys that are from Utah and or aware of the Salt Lake area, it was just off Atherton Drive there in Taylorsville, kind of by the Four Lakes Golf Course. So we go over to look at the property. I pull up and the home was built, I don't know, can't remember the exact year, but since 2000. So it's newer of a home. And this was probably, I don't know, at least 5 years, no, more than that, probably 7 or 8 years ago. We go out and we look at the property. Well, she had this home built. So it's a newer home she had built. And because she was older when she built it, she just said, I don't need a basement. It'll save me a little bit of money to build the house to not have a basement. So it was just a slab on grade that they built, so for you guys that are from California, most all of our houses in Utah have a basement. It's more rare not to have a basement than to have one. So I go out and I look at it. Well, and especially homes built since 2000, there are just not very many that are not built without a basement. Well, I go out and I look at the property and I said, okay, because it doesn't have a basement, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to come up with a value. So I'm going to go and I'll do some research on it and I'll come back and give you what I think the value is going to be. Well, my neighbor tells me that he had asked my other neighbor that is an appraiser to do an appraisal on it. And I said, okay, well, let me see what I come up with and let's see what he comes up with and then we can talk about it. So I put together my CMA. I go back and really, because there was no basement, it really kind of is. And also, actually, let me even pause in the story for a minute to say, when we do an appraisal, or excuse me, a CMA, it is really just our best guess. Like even if you had two exactly similar homes, but on different streets, they could be different in value because of what the neighbor's house looks like, or I had one that I bought that I fixed up and sold that had a power substation across the street. Should have sold for a ton higher price than it did. And in fact, if you had had an appraiser go out and do an appraisal, he would have appraised it for a ton higher. But the buyers, the people who really determine the value, were coming out and were looking at this house and they would see that this power substation across the street and they were like, I'm not interested because of that. So which totally takes the value down. So that can vary things. So as we do this, it's our best guess. So I put together my best guess. I go out and I meet him to go through it with him. And I told him, and I don't remember exactly the number, but somewhere around 185 is what I told him. Somewhere around 185 is probably what this house was worth. Well, he says, oh, well, I had so-and-so, and I won't say the name now that my son's called him an a-hole, but he says, I had so-and-so.
Saw what he offers on a VAC, they would agree.
That is true. Yes, this same guy is actually a licensed agent as well, and he does a lot of discounting. So that's the other reason we said. Anyway,
that's the only reason I said it.
This class will not be posted anywhere after, even though it's being recorded. I'm teasing. Okay, so he says, well, hey, the other neighbor did an appraisal, and he told me that it's worth 217 or 215,000, something like that. And I was like, I don't know how he came up with that as a value without a basement. So I asked, can I see the appraisal? Well, he gave me a copy of the appraisal. And as I start looking at the comparables, I notice that so now keeping in mind, this property is in Taylorsville, he used comparables from Sandy. Now, you guys that are from Utah, is a home built in Taylorsville off Atherton Drive that is right next to Four Lakes Golf Course, which I left out. The backyard is a mobile home park. Is the value there going to be the same as the property in Sandy? No. Yet that's what he used. Now he would justify that he, extrapolated for that and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is that If that house had been in Sandy, yeah, it probably would have been worth 215, but it wasn't. Well, so of course, what does the seller want to list the home for? Yeah, the 215, because of course you can always come down, right? So I just said, okay, that's fine. Let's try it and see. Because here's the one thing. The other thing I want to say to you guys in terms of doing CMAs is you can never outguess the market. Just keep that in mind. You can put this together. You can come up with what you think is your best guess. Remember, because that's really all it is a best starting point guess. You can come up with that best starting point guess, and the market may totally reject that price. Or you may have the flip side where it would have been possible. I put it on at 215 and then all of a sudden it sells for a ton more. And actually I've got a property that is under contract right now, a different neighbor on that same street. Actually, that street actually seems to be good to me for some reason, but that's on that same street that they said they wanted listed at 550. And I was just like, there's no way. One just like it, just sold had a 2-car garage instead of a 3-car garage, but for 475, there's no way we're going to get 550. We put it on at 550 and we got an offer. Now it was supposed to close yesterday and it hasn't. So cross your fingers that it still does. But the point being is it's always just your best guess as to what it is going to be. And the market will tell you. So just keep that in mind. The market is going to let you know the value of the property, and we'll say more about that in a little bit. But to begin with, it's our best guess. So I put it on at 215. Well, I wouldn't be telling this story if it would have sold for 215, right? Instead, we got nothing. And we had very few showings. We had very few things that took place. So I went back to my neighbor and said, hey, it's not working. We need to reduce the price. And I don't remember the details of how much we reduced it, where we got to, whether we did it one time or twice, but eventually we got the price under 200. Once we got it under 200, we now got an offer, and it sold somewhere between 180 and 190. I probably should have looked it up to see, but the point being that at the end of the day, my CMA was more accurate than the appraiser is kind of where I want you to see. Now that the market then was not like it is now where everything was flying off the shelf, or maybe it would have sold for 215. But
Sell for 215 today for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure today it would. But just kind of keep in mind that it's our best guess, and just because an appraiser said it doesn't mean it is correct either. Is I guess kind of where I want to go with it. But even ours is just a best guess, because I've had times where I've gone out and I've had the reverse, where I listed a property. I had one out in Magna, listed it at that time. Properties were selling in that neighborhood for between 95 and 99. And the seller said it's going to sell for 107. And I was like, there is no possible way. And even if it does, it's not going to appraise, because every single one in the neighborhood was between 95 and 99. Well, we put it on the market. First day, got an offer. We listed 107, put it on the market, got a full price offer for 107. And the seller, of course, like, told you, I knew it was going to sell for that. Well, she lucked out, because the thing is, nobody else would have probably paid that price. And what I found out was it was their next door neighbor's best friend, and they wanted to be neighbors. So they would have paid any price basically to get it. Okay. So just keep those things in mind. Now with that, I'm going to show you guys. Oh, let me pull up. I was only planned for online. So hang on. I'm going to pull up and show you guys in today's world, we would call this a meme, but back when I got this, those didn't exist. So let me show you this here. I'm going to share my screen.
I lost video. I don't know if someone's mic's unmuted, and so it's just showing me a person, but
Yeah, I haven't pulled it up yet. Give me 1 second here. Now you should have it.
perfect.
You guys see that all right? No. How about now? Good. All right. So this is perception versus reality. So this is what your house looks like to you. This is what it's going to look like to the buyer. This is what it looks like to your mortgage lender. This is what it looks like to the appraiser. And this is what it looks like to the tax assessor. All right, obviously that wasn't worth showing apparently.
It's too long. A meme's just one page.
I know.
I was laughing when I saw what it was for the mortgage perspective.
All
I thought
right,
it was
thank you. All right, I'm gonna put this back up for a minute here. So we gotta have a few more discussions and I'll put that back down. All right. Okay, so here's the next step where we're gonna go with this. Before we get into talking about the pricing, I first wanna go through it with you guys and talk about the way that an appraiser goes about it. Because there is a little bit of it's important that we understand how an appraiser does it because we have to deal with them. As we get offers on properties, we're gonna have to deal with what are they gonna come up with. So we need to understand how they do it, even though my opinion of pricing property and the way that I'm gonna show you to go about doing it, we are not gonna follow the exact same process that an appraiser does. To begin with, we will, because we need to know. So if I have a house that is just right here on, and hang on, I gotta do one other thing for these guys that are online. It's not working. Sorry, I'm trying to do one other thing for you guys here that are online. I apologize, it's taking me a second. All right, I'm gonna make this so you guys can see. All right, so I've got a house here. How does an appraiser go about appraising this? What are the things that they're going to do to come up with the value? How do they determine?
Square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms.
Okay, good. So they're going to look at square footage. What else? Yeah. So for me, I will say bedrooms and bathrooms, but I'm going to put it further down the list here. Because actually, let me even say this. Doing a CMA is an art, not a science. So keep in mind, my biggest struggle when I first started this as a new agent is I wanted it to be a science. I wanted it to be a scenario. You just plug in the information, it spits out a price. That's it. You can just rely on it. But that is not the way it works. It is an art, meaning the approach that I'm going to use to go about doing this might not be the way somebody else coming and teaching this class would tell you how to do it. But we're going to get to the same result. So just kind of keep in mind, it's an art, not a science. So for me, when I say I'm going to keep beds and baths on here, but I'm going to put them further down the list. Yes, they're important, but I feel like, again, for me, they're less important than some of these other things. So what else?
Style.
Okay, good. Style.
Location.
Okay, location. So in terms of location, what is an appraiser, how far out will they go?
I don't think they're supposed to be 2 miles, is it? Depending on how good the pumps are closer.
So good. So it depends on the location of the property and those kinds of things. But typically, if it is a mile, they don't have to justify it. They don't have to come up, they don't have to say, here's why I had to go further out. So that example I used to you, now the appraisal that he was doing was not for the bank, but he still had to put the reason that he went to Sandy to get comparables because that's a long ways and really didn't make any sense. But so typically they're going to try to be within a 1 mile radius. But with that being said, they want at least one comparable from within the actual neighborhood, if they can. Now, if there's not any, there's not any, but that's what they're going to try to do. Okay, good. What else are we looking at? How far back in time?
90 days.
So same thing with this. They typically are going to go 90 days, but they can go back to 6 months without having to justify it. So they can go back 6 months in time, but again, in our current market, that's going to be pretty unreliable to do that. And so the bank, the underwriter is going to want to see it more like 90 days. Now, as the market prices flatten out, then we can tend to go to a little bit more 6 months. But if you get 6 months back on a comparable, you're probably not going to be as effective. All right. What else? Yeah, I mean, for me, that's probably pretty good. The only other thing I would put on here is lot size. Is I typically want to see the same type of a lot size. So now keep in mind, what we're talking, part of what we're talking about is the difference between the way an appraiser is going to do it and how we're going to do it. And we typically are going to start with the way that they would do it. So we're going to get the same style of property, the same basic square footage. We're going to be in the same general area. We want to see within the last 90 days about the same lot size. And then for me, if I have enough comparables is when I will start to worry about beds and baths. But if not, if the square footage is the same, I probably don't worry about it as much. But if I have a bunch of properties that meet, which the property we're going to use today, we will probably a little bit look at that, but may or may not put a whole lot of weight on it. We'll see what it looks like for today. So that's typically the way an appraiser is going to do it. We want to start out our process doing that same type of a thing. Okay. Any questions on this before I'm going to put the screen back down? We're going to actually go through and do, I'm going to walk you guys through the process of how I would do it. All right, so I'm going to get the MLS pulled up here to start working on this for you guys to see it. Pull this out. All right, I'm going to walk you guys through the process of how I would do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to assume that I have gotten, or we have gotten a phone call from a seller. The seller has, a potential seller who says, come out and list my house. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through the process that I would go through in order to come up with a value on this home. And as we do it, I'm going to have you guys, though, share with me along the way what you think in terms of the price. But just keep in mind, I'm going to keep saying this, it is an art, not a science. And I struggled with that for a long time, is because I wanted to be able to plug it in, spit it out, and it would be correct, but that is not the way that it works. So for me personally, the way that I'm going to do this is if I get a phone call, so we're going to assume that we were prospecting. Either somebody called us or we were just doing our prospecting calls and we come across somebody that says, yeah, I want to sell my house. I'm going to walk you through the way that I like to do and what I would do in this process. So let me clear this out. So from our, and again, like I said, I know we've got some people from California and your MLS is going to look different than what ours is. Don't get caught up in that. Instead, pay attention to the process that we're going to go through. For me personally, the first thing that I like to do is to jump onto the MLS and see what the history of this property is. So for me, typically what I'm going to do is I will go in here, I'm going to do a full search. I'm going to take out the status there of active because I don't really care much about that. I'm going to come down here and put in the house number, which is 5651. And I am going to narrow it down to Salt Lake County. And you can see here that it's showing 31 properties. Well, I could go and try to narrow it down by putting the street number or something like that in there. But for me, 31, I can scroll through fast enough to find the property if it's been on the market. So I'm just going to hit view results, which is going to bring it up. And what I'm looking for now in this column here is to just see where it says Walnut View Circle. So I'm scrolling down and the first one that I see is the one I'm going to grab. So here we go. So I'm just come over here and click on this MLS number, which brings up the property. You can see here that it's got a picture and all that. And the reason that I like to do this, so I'm going to make sure I'm explaining why I'm doing this. For me, I just like to get a feel of what has gone on with the property. Now, again, this is where it's an art, not a science. There are probably a lot of people that if they were teaching you this would say, oh, I never do that. And that's fine. Like I just am showing you the way I like to do it for me. So I'm going to go through and pull this up, and then I probably would even just print this off. But I'm going to click here where it shows the history of what's gone on with this property. And you can scroll through here, whoops, and you can see that it first went on the market in August of 2000, and then this most recent was July of 2012 that it sold. Okay, so it's been 8 years since it's been on the market. So that's fine. I just am more always just curious, especially if we could see on here that they bought it like 2 or 3 years ago. I like to just kind of even maybe look at the photos to see what we can see about it. But we can see that this one was on in the most recent. So I'm going to click on that most recent one so we can see what the pictures and things look like. But you can see here that it sold for $125,000 in 2012. It was a cash offer. Let's take a look at the pictures here just to see what it looks like.
That is not at all how
Yeah, so this was the house that Douglas was born in, but it did not look like this. He was born before this. So yeah, let me give you guys the background on this thing based on that. So this is a home, this is the first home that I own. I probably shouldn't leave the picture on the toilet seat.
the original toilet that you owned.
Yeah, probably. That carpet I did put in, but so in 2000, in fact, actually, let me just do it this way. I'll give you the history of this. So you can see here, so I had this house built in 93 or 94 or whatever it was there that it said. And then in 2000, we decided to go buy a new house. So we put this one up for sale on the market in August of 2000, listed at $139,900. And don't ask me why I did this, but you can see in August we listed it for $139,900. It didn't sell. So September 13th, I changed it from $139,900 to $139,000. Huge price reduction. But if you look at what happened next, 2 days later, it sold. So I knew what I was doing, apparently, because then it did sell after that. Okay. So we sold this property for $146,000 and what I wouldn't give to still own it today. But we sold it. So then what happened as we go through this, you can see, so I sold it September of 2000. The person who bought it from me then 8 years later put it on the market for $231 and left it there for about 3 months, then reduced it to $195. It still hadn't sold. Now, if you keep in mind what was going on in the market in 2009, they then dropped it from $195 to $159. It still didn't sell, went off the market, actually ended up getting foreclosed on, if I remember right. Then they put it back on the market here in 2011. It sold in 2012, and that was the MLS we're looking at where it sold for $125,000. Well, this is what it looked like. So we're going to go through, let's assume though, for the sake of what we're doing today, let's assume, because the person bought it for $125,000. So these agents in California are probably like, what? Like the Fred I see on there is probably like, 5 for 125? Yeah, none of this flooring was the same except for that one bedroom. That carpet was the same that I put in, all the rest is not. Well, let's assume what happened is that the person has bought it when we were prospecting, we got this lead that they said to us, we've gone through and remodeled, we've updated the kitchen, we put in new carpet, new paint, so it doesn't look like that anymore. So let's assume on a scale of a 1 to 10, it's an 8 or a 9, let's say. Sound good? Okay, so that's how we're going to do our CMA. But I always just like to get this printed off so that I have an idea. Had 3 bedrooms up, 1 full bath, had a half bath on the main, 2 bedrooms in the basement, and a 3/4 bath. And about 1,800 square feet. It was 0.19 of an acre, built in 93. So typically I would print this off so that I would have it. But for the sake of what we're doing right now, just you guys can help me remember some of that stuff if for some reason I don't. All right, so that's where I usually start with. I would print that off. I take it with me. We go out and we look at the house, and I'm going to make notes on that. Typically is the way I would go about doing it. So we're going to assume we went out, we looked at the house. We've decided it's probably condition-wise, it's an 8 or a 9 is what we're going to say that it is. So now let's do our let's do our CMA approaching it the way that an appraiser would do it first. That's how I always start. So based on what we've talked about, I'm going to clear my search criteria out of here. We want to see sold properties, and I want to do it. I'm going to pull up the map here, and we're going to do a radius search for that. So I'm going to say I want to set the radius, and I'm just going to start it at a mile because that's usually what I do. Now, for you guys that are Utah, you can plug in an MLS number right here. If you weren't aware of that, you can type in an MLS number to pull up the property, or you can put in the address. And let's set the criteria here and see what we get. All right, somebody had a comment, I think, up here. Okay, cool. Thanks, Darren. All right, so you'll notice here that I have put in the criteria of sold, put it on the map. There's 345. Now, I obviously don't want 345 comparables to use. So how many do I want?
Maybe at least 3.
Okay. Yeah, I would say somewhere in that 3 to 6 range. It's kind of like, for me, if you start to get more than 6, like it's too much. Less than 3, I kind of get a little like, oh, I don't know if that gives me enough to really go on. Well, I don't want 345. So within that 1 mile radius, going back a year is what it's got right here. So we don't want to do that. We already talked about before, let's try to keep it within 90 days. So I'm going to just go back 30, 60, 90, and we'll just plug in right there is good enough. So now, oh, not of 19. 2020. So now we're down to 97. Okay, so what else should I put in?
Property type.
So yeah, on type, we're gonna want single family. That's fine. I'm gonna do the style. Now on style, this particular home is what we would call a tri-level or a multi-level. So I'm gonna put that in. Now, let me speak to for a minute just of some differences. Why is that not? There we go. So now we're down to 40. Now, let me kind of just explain something. And some of this, when I say it's an art, not a science, is the more of these that you do, the more CMAs that you do, the more you're going to develop kind of this gut feel. And so just kind of keep that in mind of that, especially for you guys that are new agents, you should be weekly doing a CMA. Pick a property and go run a CMA on it and just see what you think of the price. You should be doing that because that's how you're going to get good at pricing property. Also, what I just know, and I haven't seen this as much lately, but if I would have put in tri-level, multi-level, and the number of properties that showed up would have been very few, the other thing that I would have then tried to do is I would have gone on the style and looked up 2 stories as well. And the reason being for that is there are some agents that think that a 2-story is going to sell better than a tri-level or a multi-level. So even though it is a tri-level or multi-level home, they will put it on as a 2-story because they think more people are going to see it. So I would then have done that, but then I would have looked at the pictures to make sure it really is a tri-level, multi-level, not a 2-story. Oops, I gotta mute somebody here. Yeah, I'm gonna mute you, Sean, just we can hear some background noise there. All right, so we've got enough, so I'm not gonna worry about that. What else did I say we wanted to put in to narrow it down? Yeah, acreage and square footage is where I would go next. So I'm probably, because of just knowing that area, I'm not going to worry about the lot size right now. Oh, the other thing we didn't list up there was year built. So, okay, square footage. So it was 1,800 square feet. So how big of a range should we put it? What do you think?
100 up, 100 down.
Okay, 100. Any other thoughts? 300. Okay. Now this is where, like I said, it's an art, not a science. There's not a right answer. So for me, here's how I typically do it. For me personally, I would look at it and say, I kind of feel like if the home is 1,800 square feet, 2,000 is a number that you will hear from buyers of saying, oh, I want at least 2,000 square feet. So for me, I'm going to cut it off on the upper end at 2,000 just because of that. So I'm just going to put in 1999 because if it's 2,000, I feel like there are people who would go look at the home if it had 2,000 that won't at 1,800. So I'm going to cut it off. On the downside, I'm just going to say 1,600. And again, there's not a right answer. You could do 17 or 18, whatever, or 15, I mean. But for me, I'm going to just see what that does. Okay, so that gets us down to 24. The other one that I'm going to put in is year built. Here's the rule of thumb that I would use. Actually, the rule of thumb on square footage for me is usually about 10%. I'll usually do 10% on each side. So the bigger the house, the more of a range I would put square footage wise. And truthfully, actually, the bigger the house, I'll maybe go to 5% on the square footage instead of 10. Same type of a thing on year built. The older the home, the bigger the range I will put in. The newer the home, the more I would tighten it up. So for me, this was built, I think 93 it showed. So I would say, well, you guys tell me, what should I put in?
83 to 2000.
Okay, good, yeah. So same thing on the year built. I'm going to say, I'm going to probably put 1999 for year built again, just because again, you're going to hear from buyers of, well, I want something built 2000 or newer. So I kind of feel like that separates that. So on this, I'm just going to even say 1985. Let's see what that is. So that brings us down to 18. So now the other one that I may do would be garage capacity, although it probably is not going to give us much of a difference. We want a 2-car garage.
So I didn't see, where did you, I mean, without putting the city in, how did you limit this down? Did you put an address in somewhere when I was pulling it up on the computer or what?
Yeah. Yeah, what I did is this view map right here. And then I did the radius tool and plugged in the address to have it be 1 mile.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, so we're at 17 properties that are about the same square footage and all that. So this is where now I would probably start to look at, maybe we should look at bathrooms or bedrooms or some of that. What do you guys think? 17. 17 is not bad to look at. Okay, I'm fine with that. That's fine. So here's how I would do this. So I'm going to go view results here. And I'm going to take this and we're going to go to the agent full report here. Now for me, let me explain to you what I would do on this scenario. Now you'll notice on this one here that it was 3 bedrooms and 2 baths up. Well, what was our subject property? You remember? 3 and 4. Yeah, it was 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. So what this tells me is this particular property has a master bathroom. Our subject property didn't. Are those going to be valued the same, do you think? Yeah, so for me, that's probably where on this one, and I would, because we've got 17 properties. Now, if we only had 3 or 4, I might leave them in. But for me, the fact that we've got 17 properties, and who knows if it'll make a difference or not, I probably would go through and take those out, any of them that have the 2 baths. So I'm just going to remove that.
Well, this class is worth it. I just learned you can remove.
You didn't know you could do that? Yeah. So you can just go through and remove these. Now, hopefully I don't remove all 17 of them here. You won't. All right, so there's one that we will probably keep for now. Let's remove this one.
So would that have been a step you would have taken before we said to just jump into this? Would you?
Yeah, probably I would. For me, just knowing
because you know it now?
Yes.
Or-
No, I because I've done it long enough, I would have just known on these multi-level homes, I would get rid of. I mean, technically, this one has a master bath as well. So I'm gonna get rid of that one. But yeah, I just typically would have already narrowed it down, so I wasn't searching through the 17. So this one's only got 2 bedrooms up and 1 full bath. So again, on that, I probably would potentially leave it. And I don't know, you guys tell me, do you think, just think about, here's the thing, let me pause for a minute. When I'm doing this, the way an appraiser typically will appraise a property is thinking like a seller. When I'm gonna do this though, I wanna think like a buyer. So you kind of wanna think through the process the way that a buyer would. Does a buyer typically, when they're buying a house, are they going to value a 2-bedroom upstairs like this the same as a 3-bedroom?
Depends on the family size and what they're wanting.
Okay, good. So that's exactly right. But for me, again, this is where it's an art, not a science. For me personally, I kind of feel like, and this is where your own biases will play into this. My bias is, well, I don't think I would want necessarily a 2-bedroom. I'd rather have a 3. Of course, that's irrelevant now. I don't.
I think I would remove
I
that one
don't want
too.
any of them on the, but yeah, now I don't want any of them on the same level as me. So
I think you would want to put this one because it's in the same neighborhood. It's a Walnut View.
okay, good. That's good catch. Somebody online said something too.
I just said I think I would remove that one too.
The 2-bedroom.
Yes.
So okay, good. So this is a good example though of where you can see some might say I would leave it in because it's in the same neighborhood, which so I'm going to probably lean towards that same thing. If I'm going to leave it in because we're in Walnut View Circle, this is Walnut View Drive. And having lived there, like it's just right outside of the circle. So that one actually, I would agree. I'm going to keep that one if we get down to R and we have too many. Exactly. If we end up with too many, we'll pull it out. All right, I probably should have at least narrowed it down a little so that I didn't have to keep searching all these. It's what?
Tickle grass is one of my favorites.
Oh. All right, so let's leave that one. All right, we're seeing, so we've got quite a few that are the 3-bedroom, 1-bath. So that's where potentially we could go through and take those out. So we've now got 9, we're down to 9. So probably I would say we take out those others that are the 2-bedroom. I don't know. I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm not gonna go through and we're not gonna totally get rid of all of those. What I want to do now is let's just go through and look at these ones that we do have. So let's take a look at, so this listed at 359, sold for 360, no concessions, was 50 something days on the market. Let's look at the history on it to see just, so they started at 359.9, dropped it to 349, and then they got it sold, okay. But actually went back up to 360, isn't that interesting?
With adjusting the lot size, how far up would you go? If it's like, say, half an acre?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So for like I say, for me on this one, I just again knowing the area and knowing what's going to come up, I didn't worry about lot size because essentially these are all going to be the same. But let's say that it was 0.3 of an acre. I would use a bigger area. I would search a bigger area to find more homes that had a bigger lot size. So same kind of a thing of like on this one where it was 0.19, I probably would do 0.15 to 0.25 or something. But if it was a 1/3 acre, I probably would be 0.25 to even close to a half an acre. If it's a half, like the bigger the lot size, I'm going to do a bigger range than that as well. So yeah, great question. Thank you. All right, so based on this, let's actually we'll click on a couple of these to just kind of see. So really, kitchen not updated on this one either, really. Sorry, I'm going too fast. So not really updated, sold for 360. This one's a 342.5, was 4 days on the market. Let's see what it looked like. Now, part of what I'm trying to figure out here is how much condition is making a difference. So I mean, flooring's updated on that one. It looks like cabinets are just painted.
Would you be limiting your comparables based on sold terms? So like, for example, cash offers are notorious for going under what it would for an FHA or a conventional loan. Would you just weed those out off the top, or what would you do there?
Yeah, good, well, good question. So for me personally, I usually don't worry about that at this point. I would do it more if I started to notice a pattern in that. So like, let's say where this one is conventional, I didn't even pay attention to what the first one was. For me personally, I don't worry about the loan terms yet. If I get to where I'm trying to figure out why did this one sell for this price and this one for that price, I might start to look at that. But I feel like even now,
I had an appraiser kill one of, well, it didn't kill the deal. It just made it a little more difficult, where we had some comparables sell for 314 for this Rambler. And then he came forward with 3 properties. One of them was cash term for 275. And I'm like, that's not a comparable. And it sank the value when it came to the opinion of the appraisal.
even now, it's creating so many more cash offers that are over asking price. So I feel like it's not.
yeah, yeah. So what Douglas is saying is, to some extent, even today in today's market, there are a lot of cash ones that are overpriced too. So, but I would totally agree with what you're saying, Darren. If I had 3 or 4 comparables that were all pretty comparable in price too, but then all of a sudden one that was way lower and it was a cash, I still would feel like, let's look at the condition. So I guess for me, I'm more worried about the condition than the terms at this point.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, so let's see the next here. So you make sure you guys are keeping it, paying attention, because I'm gonna ask you to commit to a price here in a second, what you think we should list it at. So this one's 350. I'm gonna kind of just, I know I'm going kind of quick, but I just kind of want to give you enough. That wainscot looks nice. Cabinets, I don't know, what do you guys think?
You got to factor in if they're including those couches too. That could raise the price a little bit. That's right.
Countertop's not great on this. Oh, did you come to take over?
I thought we'd be different.
Chris, I'm sorry you put a mess in.
There, now you feel better?
Yes.
All right, 350. All right, here's a 362. Let's see what it
This
looks
was the
like.
ones we're gonna throw out.
This was one we were going to.
Yep. Just
Because it was a 2-bedroom. Yeah, so look at, like, here's the surprising thing to me is that we've got a little bit of a range, but really like for me, when I'm trying to look at condition, I put a lot of weight into like, what does the kitchen look like?
because you cook so much.
Yeah, because I do.
That was a sarcastic answer, wasn't it?
No, serious.
First
Good.
one.
No, I don't cook them.
That one's pretty nice.
Yeah, but it sold for 332.
Yeah, see, that's just it. This is where this is interesting, because that one actually condition wise might be one of the better ones we looked at. And it was September. Well, maybe it's because it was September instead of October.
Not the craziest.
I know, this could be true. All right, let's see.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm surprised very few of these are updated. All right, here we go. Whoa,
What was the price of this one?
now
It's
wait a
just a
minute,
bad
why would you
picture.
do that? Look at how much money they spend on the kitchen and then you go into the living room and
It's a bad picture. That's incorrect.
you think,
That's not,
If they had priorities, I don't know.
that's,
it looks dirty right here.
I think it's a bad light picture.
Let's
Well,
hope
once
it's
we get to
bad
bedroom,
lighting.
But why wouldn't you put granite? Such a nice kitchen. No granite,
How do you know it's not granite?
doesn't look like it.
I don't think it's bad lighting on this carpet. I think it's bad carpet.
Looks clear on your computer. doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
The projector looks,
Oh, it's even worse on the, oh, yeah, it's way worse there.
I wonder if there was a budget in here. I didn't quite see on the original listing. It said there was some concessions, I think, but it didn't say how much.
Oh, good. You bring up a good point. Let's talk about that.
Yep, there goes $7,000.
So here's the thing though on this
only 2 bedrooms.
is, lenders will not allow carpet allowances. So just kind of know that, even though you're going to hear that all the time from people, oh, could we just do a carpet allowance? A lender is not going to allow that. So even though it is very, very common for people to say, talk about, the lender's not going to let you give them back money for carpet, just kind of so you know that. So on this, there's concessions, but that's going to be almost always it's closing costs. They're paying now, so they could pay closing costs, and then the seller could go do the, or buyer could go do carpet. Just kind of so you know. So this is a 340, which is interesting because some of those look the best, you know, condition wise. So this one's one I would throw out, by the way. Right now, I'm getting rid of it because that's actually like when I click on it, that is not the same. Even though it might be a tri-level multi, it's not the same. It's not the same layout as these. And especially with how many comps we've got.
I thought it was because I had a Chevy in the driveway.
So this one looks, paint looks good, two-tone.
This house would be a great comp. You got a terrible taste in cars.
Yeah. So
Sorry, I can't use this when I give you your price.
well, the other thing we should look at too on these ones is the lower price is based on the VAC that was offered. The buyer the commission. All right, so far, what do you guys think? What's the price that you would recommend to the seller based on what we've seen?
On a high, medium, low.
Nope, I don't want a high, medium, low. The seller's gonna say, no, what should we list it for? So I'm the seller now asking you guys, what should we list it for? You guys online, either unmute or throw it in the chat box. I don't care which one, but everybody gets to play. Give me a price. How much you gonna list it for?
Don't you need them to type something?
Yeah, you gotta type something in there anyways.
We're talking with today's market, right?
Yeah, we're talking, we're assuming we're gonna be listing it today.
360.
Okay, Carla said 360.
359.9.
Rick hasn't even been here and he said 359.9, okay?
You said everybody had to
I
play.
feel comfortable anywhere between 340.
I think under 350, you're going to bring in more traffic, getting that competitive edge going.
Okay, 350.
350 and like tell the sellers starting at low to get interested in it.
Okay.
It's gonna drive the price up.
Yeah, so to some extent, I agree with what Joey's saying is
Great.
a lot of times a seller wants to start high thinking we can always come down. But even look at the one that we saw, I don't remember if it's still in our list, but we looked at the one that they actually, once they reduced the price, then it drove it back up to where it was, so.
This is kind of what these people did here. This is the
I
good-
like the idea of the 359.9.
So you went from 360 to 359.9?
Yeah, sounds a little better.
Carla, I'm right with you. If you notice on this house, when I sold it, I did a price reduction of $900, so. All right. Well, let me see what people are online saying here. What do you guys said online? Come on.
The ones from Cali are gonna
Right.
Yeah, everybody from California is gonna walk around, yeah.
if they have.
We know
All
a
right.
good agent.
So I'm seeing, so Darren's 345, 355, 349, 350. Okay, good. So, all right. Now, so that's basically how an appraiser is going to go about doing it. But what do we, remember I said we want to think like a buyer. So what do we not still know at this point though? Meaning I've asked you to commit to a price, but is that really the price that the house is going to be worth? For me, I don't know. It's a good guess at this point, maybe. What do we not know?
What comps your appraisers will use.
What's under contract in the area and what's.
Good, so let's do the, what we don't know is, for me, so now let me explain this piece. So I'm gonna go back and what I wanna look at now is backup and under contract. Or for you guys that are in California, I don't know, Fred, maybe you can tell us, but maybe you call it pending or something. I don't know if Fred's still on. His attention. You still on with this?
I'm still on. We have pending and under contract also.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Fred. So, so in California, you're probably going to want to look at the pendings and under contracts. For Utah, we look at it as the under contract or the backups of what they're looking for. Now, you'll notice I used all the same criteria here. I just changed it to looking at, let's see what is under contract. Now, here, let me explain why I want to do this. Is for me, remember we talked about an appraiser does a good job of looking at the last 90 days-ish or so. Well, that's great. But when the buyers are out looking, they're not looking at the homes that have sold. They're looking at what is currently for sale. So for me, this under contract and backup, or for California, the under contract and pending, basically to me, what that is looking at is the buyers who are currently in the market today, or the ones that are real. That's probably the best way of saying it. To see what is happening with the most real buyers today, I got to look at the under contracts. And here's why. Stop and think about it in terms of the stock market. If I went and looked at what Google stock price was, even last week, does that really play anything into what I could sell it for today? No. And so I like to think about the real estate market as being similar to the stock market, only it doesn't move as fast. I mean, now to some extent, we might be right now in the market moving that fast, but it's not as quickly, meaning the price isn't running up and down in a ton in a day or two on the real estate market. I mean, a little bit, but so for me, I feel like to really decide, so I'm going to just see, I don't know if it'll change your opinion or not, but let's take a look at these 5 that are on the market under contract right now. And now I'm not going to go through it with the same exact detail, but notice, let's just do it from right here. Even. Notice, we've got one now that's under contract at 375. And then there's a 364, and then 354, 345, and 334. Now, I mean, let's just kind of look at the condition quickly.
Master bedroom.
What?
Master bedroom.
Was this one had a master bath?
Yep.
All right. Well,
That's the 350.
That's beautiful.
yeah, that's the 375 one. Yeah, it does have the master. So if we were to take that out,
Purple cabinets.
let's look at the 334 here.
Do you think that's where they got 375 purple cabinets?
100%. It's because of what? The purple cabinets. The purple cabinets.
They found out one buyer.
Yeah, they did. I will pay 375 for the cabinets. All right. Does this change your opinion at all?
Yep.
This one's 355, not updated.
I think that means it didn't change your
Oh.
opinion.
Yeah, but that one
Yeah.
doesn't have what?
Very well done.
Oh, yeah. All right. Does this change anybody's opinion?
Nope, 345 strong.
All right. Anyone else? Speak up if it changes your opinion of what you would say.
Nope.
All right, so Kelly's asking what's available now. Good. That's the next question that I was going to say is, did that still tell us? No. So, because keep in mind, this under contract tells me what a buyer was willing to offer recently. Well, the next step is that we got to keep into account that an appraiser doesn't look at, and this is why I feel like we are better than what the appraiser is in valuing the property, is because now we got to go back here and go, okay, let's see what's currently for sale, because what are buyers going to be competing against? And let's see if that changes your mind. Now notice, here's one of the things that I wanted to just pause on for a minute and explain to you guys. What determines the value of a house?
What buyers want.
Yeah, basically what a buyer is willing to pay. Now, how does the buyer determine what they're willing to pay?
Comparison.
Okay, good. So they're comparison shopping. I have trained him so well, or Dave has trained him so well.
I know, every time he has a
Third
question.
time in this class is a charm. Yeah, that's the other time. It's only his 3rd time coming.
Been here before.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're sitting at home looking for something to watch, and he just pulls up one of the classes he's taught recently. And, oh, all right, let's watch this. He likes watching himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy my teaching. So now, no. All right. I apologize to you guys online when you don't get to have as much fun. You're probably like,
We're gripping my 12-year-old brother.
yeah. All right. So ultimately, what's going to determine it for the buyers is they go out and comparison shop. So they're out looking at what's on the market. See, here's what's interesting to me is it doesn't take a buyer very long to become very in tune with our market. And the reason that they do it is because they go out and start looking at this. In fact, I actually sometimes think that the buyers might be better at valuing the properties than even the agent is, because they're so tuned into what And because at the end of the day, they want the best value for their money. Well, so now so stop and think for a minute. What I just showed you guys, I want to make sure you guys really understand what we just saw. There are 5 properties under contract. Now, ultimately, we might have taken out a couple of those because of having the master bath. But at the end of the day, here's one of the things that I have found, and I think most people don't think this way though about the market. What tends to happen in the real estate market, and I don't care when it is, and if you guys want me to prove it to you, I'll prove it to you. But essentially what we just saw is there are 5 properties under contract. What do you left?
Inside joke, keep going.
Okay. There are 5 properties that are under contract. Here's what that means to me. There are in the current market in this area that we're looking at, right now today, there are 5 people wanting to buy a house like that. Now, why? Why would that? Meaning sometimes when I say that, people will say, well, no, because those people already bought. But what I'm telling you is even though those 5 have already bought, today, looking in this area in that price range, there are, and it could vary a little. There might be 3 people right now looking, or there might be 9 people looking, but like it's somewhere around 5 people looking to buy. So if we're going to be putting our home on the market, what I'm saying to you is I know, and I could, in fact, I will use this sometimes if I'm competing for a listing. I would go to a for sale by owner or somebody, and I would say to them, look, I know you're interviewing multiple agents. You need to ask the other agents how many buyers there are for their house. Now, if I asked you guys that, so let's assume I'm the seller, you guys are the agents. Now, forget what I just said. So go back 10 minutes ago. If I would have said to you, how many buyers are there for this house? How would have you answered it?
Great question. Let me get back to you.
So Marissa would have said, I'll get back to you. What about you guys online? How would you answer it?
It's a buyer's market or seller's market. So there's a ton of buyers right now.
Okay, good. See, I would set you up to fail if I was the other agent. Because I would say, look, Joey, I know you're going to be interviewing other agents. You need to ask them how many buyers there are for your house. And if they're going to tell you one of 2 answers. They're either going to say, I have no idea, or they're going to say there's one, which the truth is there's only one person going to buy your house, or one couple or whatever that's going to buy your house. But the real potential number of buyers for this house we're talking about today is 5. Or, I mean, it might be 4, it might be 6, it might be 3, it might be 7, but it's somewhere in that range. Now, how can I say that?
Because you know how many people have sold their house.
Well, and if for some reason something doesn't work out on those 5, where are they going to look?
Okay, good. So here's what I want you guys to realize. And here's the interesting thing. And like I said, we'll do it if you want to at the end of the class if there's time. But ultimately, if we were to go in and say, I want to see the number of sold properties using all the same criteria, and I came down here into this sold date field. So I came down here to the sold date, and I plugged in a 45-day window back in 2009 or 10. You would naturally think, well, the market was worse, so there wouldn't be probably very many buyers. What I have found is I would be willing to bet if we went and did it, and I have done this in the past, so I kind of do know, but it's going to be somewhere in that same range. So what I'm telling you is, in essence, the number of buyers that there are for a property in a given area don't really change that much. It'll fluctuate a little bit. There'll be a little bit of a fluctuation. Meaning, like in today's market, I wouldn't be surprised that there are 5 or 6 or 7 people looking right now to buy this house, versus in the other market, maybe there were only 3. So part of what we're looking at when we're doing this, and this is why I say to you, I approach it a little different than an appraiser, because an appraiser is going to just look at what happened in the last 6 months or whatever. Then we looked at, though, there are 5 people looking to buy. Well, how many do they have to choose from? 1, which means what? That's going to drive this is just supply and demand stuff. Ultimately, what I know is we can be aggressive on the price because there are 5 people essentially that want to buy their house today. So we can be a little bit aggressive of it, but I also do like what has been said of also in today's market, you would be better to be a little bit lower and let the people bid the price up because that's probably what's going to happen than to go in at too high of a price. So, but let's look and see what is currently for sale, because that's what we're competing against. See, and that's part of what you got to get a seller to understand is we got to see where the competition is, because here's, and not as crucial today, but if you plan on being in this business for a while, we're going to have a time where all of a sudden our inventory climbs. Now, I don't know when that's going to happen. And for Utah, at least, I think it's going to be a long time before we see that happen. Now, I don't know if this is funny or not funny, but prior to this year, I would usually at this point in the class say, for Utah at least, barring some disease, I don't remember that I used the word disease, but I said something comes in and wipes out half the population, we're not going to see our inventory grow. And then COVID-19 hit. But the funny thing is it did the opposite. Like our inventory initially, though, in March initially, our inventory did start to climb. But then very quickly people got sick of being in their house and were like, I need a new one, I guess. I don't know. But all of a sudden the inventory has gone back to where we're back basically down to record low. Fred, is that the same in California, or at least in Valencia or Santa Clarita?
Yep, we have no inventory at all.
Yeah. So same thing's happening in California as well. Now, the good news for us, Fred, though, is a lot of the people that are selling there are coming here and paying cash for our houses.
And we get the reload. So that's okay. That works for me.
That works for you. But I just mean we don't have people coming there. Now, if you could get Governor Newsom to open up Disneyland, maybe people would start to come again. All right.
We're trying.
There was a pity lab, Russ.
I know. I'm ready to go to Disneyland. All right.
The problem is he was calling it 210.
Oh, but we were.
That's true. All right.
Yeah, right.
So here's the thing. Based on what we've talked about, now what would you say the price you would recommend?
359, 9.
So Rick's down $10 now. He's come down $10.
I'm going 354.9. My final answer. So I'd say 350. Because then other buyers like, well, this one's $5 grand cheaper. And then, so they're just looking at the sticker price, but then they're going to end up going over.
Yeah.
And even just looking at it, that house is smaller and it has less bedrooms.
Yeah, we didn't even pull up.
We didn't pull up and look at condition or anything.
I thought this was
Right, so
part of the
we're not even
same.
looking at condition.
Before we open our mouth, look at what we got.
So let's see what
It's
we.
that
it doesn't
RV
matter, right?
pad.
Ooh,
It'll sell.
oh, that's nice.
How long is this now?
My house is nicer.
Yes.
So here's the interesting thing. This has been 5 days on the market. They started at 370 and
Wow.
dropped it to 355.
Oh, that was homey.
So actually interesting though, it had an offer that then looks like it's fallen
Has
through.
3 bedrooms, so yeah, let's stay with 355.
So you're at 355?
I am still.
Okay.
354.9.
That's the biggest jump.
Yeah, but what happens if you get there and it's more nicer?
We're making progress here.
We are. I'm being influenced.
All right.
349.9.
With a smile and a wink.
You're right.
There was no wink.
I couldn't see
There
it.
he goes,
Your eyes
winking
was
at
a
me
wink,
again.
no, it's so much better.
All right. What about you guys online? Anybody changing their mind on price?
Bad agent.
Kelly for the win.
I'll bet they offered 2%. Go check.
Probably. Ooh,
Oh,
good point.
Because we're
Yeah.
taking it to 7%.
That's right.
Yeah, this is Carla. I probably was too high.
They
Throw it
just
out the
changed
window.
price change.
So no, they offered 3% to the buyer's agent.
God bless them.
All right.
So thinking from a buyer's perspective, same thing with the 2,000 square feet and more. 350 to 450 or whatever is my range. So on the $25,000 increments, I wouldn't list it 349.9. That's not
Perfect.
gonna come on their hot sheet.
Perfect. So yeah, good. Thank you for bringing that up, Joey, because I wanted to hit that. Here's the thing, is what I would say, and this is one of those legacy things that is hanging around still, meaning like when you're watching an infomercial on TV and they bring out these Ginsu knives or whatever, and they're like, and you can get it all for just $19.99. Like it kind of makes sense to offer those from $19.99. And for a long time, us as agents would do that and market it that way prior to every property showing up on the internet. Ever since though, the MLS is now available for people to see it, I would recommend not doing a $9.99 type, like what Joey's saying, the $349.9. And here's why. If the buyer is qualified up to, let's say, 375 or 380 or something, they're typically going to go on and do a search and start their search at 350 and go up. So if you're at 349.9, you're now not included in that search. So by putting it on the round number of 350, you're now going to be included in people who do a search from 325 to 350, or somebody saying 350 to 375. You're going to show up both ways. When you do it the other way, we tend to think, oh, well, the 349.9 sounds better than the 350. Okay, but
Every offer I've always written on one was 349.9, always just round up to 350. So,
I always round down.
of course, you skip.
Yeah.
So realistically, I don't know that because in my experience at least, that no one's been like, oh, it's such a better deal at 349.9. They're like, it's 350.
Well, I think if everything's completely equal on two different homes, the mindset is to get them emotionally connected. So if you're at 355 and you're at 349.9, their natural assumption is these guys are going to be more negotiable because that's where they're at.
If they even see your
But
property.
if they see your property, is if everything is equal.
Right,
So-
but if we're doing that from 350, there's no difference between 355.
Well,
And-
personally, if it was me, I would be going to probably 360 on this if everything was equal, or if it was better. Because you can future pace. If there's 5 people in the marketplace looking, look, you're gonna get multiple offers. And if your house is either equal or better, look, trying to get them emotionally connected, that's a good place to be because it will drive it up because people just have to have it.
And this is why I say it's an art, not a science.
That's it. Really is.
But do 350.
350.
Right.
All right. What questions do you guys have?
Wow.
Did I hear Rick say 360?
He said he would do 360.
Well, so him and I were closer. I was thinking to go down, but now I guess I was kind of okay with my first thought.
So now you're back to 360?
Yeah, well, I said 359.9, but now I'm going 360.
I don't think
Alright.
you'd ever regret listing at 350.
I
But I
agree.
like the idea of coming in with multiple offers because it's lower. So I don't know.
Offer for you're
Yeah,
probably,
and
if you're listed 350, you're gonna push it up anyway.
Well, and that's the point. And at that
Yeah,
point,
I agree.
people are gonna do more to get the property at 360, whereas if you listed at 360 and a person would pay 360.
Well, you're seeing that in multiple offers right now. I mean, it's interesting when and I get to look at most of the offers in this office. It's interesting how that happens, how they start getting emotionally attached. And it's like, I gotta have it, I'm gonna keep bidding up, or they're gonna do non-refundable earnest money or appraisal waivers, or a lot of goofy stuff is going on right now because of the lack of inventory, which means one thing, you can future pace a property.
Yep.
Because what I can get for my money is what it's worth. It's what a buyer's willing to pay.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. All right. No questions? All right, then here's where we'll wrap up with then. Here's my recommendation for you guys is,
Listed at 320.
Yeah, and call me. So here's my recommendation, especially for the newer agents, until you're comfortable with this, you need to be doing CMAs weekly, every week. And here's how I recommend doing it. For a new agent, find a vacant property so that you're not putting a seller out when you don't really potentially have a buyer for it. Find a vacant property, go look at it, and then go back to the office and run a CMA and see what you think. And then keep an eye and see what it sells for. That's how you're going to develop the ability to do this. Now, the one thing that I want to hit on that that I will just say to you guys, and again, I'm going to preface it with this is an art, not a science, but a lot of times people will want to look at, and you'll notice I didn't ever bring up, we never once talked about this, price per square foot. I personally don't put a lot of weight in the price per square foot unless I cannot find comparables. If I can't find other comparables, then I might start looking at in the area, what is the price per square foot? But the reason I don't put a lot of weight in that is because price per square foot doesn't take into account the number of garages it has. Price per square foot doesn't take into account the lot size. Price per square foot doesn't take into account the condition of the property. And so, or the layout of a property, any of those things. So for me personally, again, this is an art, not a science. I know a lot of agents who rely a ton on that price per square foot, and that's fine. But for me, I don't really put a whole lot of weight in it unless I can't find other comparables. If I can't find other comparables, I'll do that. There are going to be times also that, and I know I made it sound like we were going to wrap up, and then I just had another thought that I'm going to share with you. So we're not. So just when you thought you were getting out of here, you're not. So here's what I want to just talk to you about. So let me put the screen up and I'm going to show you something. Here's the thing. There are going to be times that what you have to do is basically, I call this the DART method, is that basically there's no comparables. And essentially what I tell the seller is we're just going to create a dartboard. You're going to throw a dart and that's the price we're going to start at. Like ultimately, sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to just kind of go, I have no clue, because you'll come across some properties that are so unique that there aren't comparables. And so the only thing you can do is to just throw a dart at a dartboard and go, okay, that's the price we're starting at. But here's the key thing. So let me erase this. Here's the key thing that you want to make sure that you do get your seller trained in. And that is our pricing strategy. So when we are talking about pricing and doing a CMA, here's the key thing, is you should be future pacing the seller of letting them know, this is our best guess. This is the price we're going to start at. But here's what we want to keep an eye on, is the number of showings that we get and the number of offers that we get. If we and you want to keep an eye on this, typically I train it as every 3 weeks. You want to be keeping an eye on this. Every 3 weeks, how many showings, how many offers. In our current market though, I would say you're looking at max 2 weeks and really even to some extent a few days maybe. But so the window is shorter. Same thing with the other thing people will ask me, what if the property's a $2 million property? Well, then maybe it's a few months. You do 2 or 3 months at this. But ultimately, what you want to look at is every 3 weeks, how many showings and how many offers. If you get 0 showings and 0 offers, what the market is telling you, whoops, I'm writing it wrong. The market is telling you you are overpriced and you need to reduce between 7 and 10%. If you're getting some showings, and I would define some as 1 to 3 a week, but no offers, the market's telling you need to reduce between 5 and 7%. That's ultimately what you need to train your sellers in, so that weekly, as you're calling and updating them, you're telling them we had no showings, no offers. Now, if you remember, what I told you is that's the market letting you know you're overpriced. And don't say overpriced. We need to improve the price, and we need to improve it by somewhere in the 7 to 10% range if we want to get the property sold. Now, it's possible that they're even more than that overpriced. And if that's the case, this is just where you start. And then you're going to keep an eye on it again to see what happens. And if you're getting some showings, which again, I would define as 1 to 3 a week, but no offers, you're 5 to 7%. You need to reduce the price on. Now, make sure you are doing that. When you go out and list a property, even as great as the market is today, I would still say have this conversation, because you just never know, again, if that property is going to come down. Maybe there's a busy road by it, who knows? But ultimately, if they'll follow this strategy, they will get the property sold. I want to tell you a quick story on this of a property that I sold up. It was a cabin up Big Cottonwood Canyon. And I went out there to list it. And the scenario on it, it was a brother and sister that owned the property. So it was their parents' cabin that the parents had then died. Had been in the family for 60 years. The parents died, left it to the 2 kids, this brother and sister. Brother and sister both get married, have families. They use the cabin off and on. The brother would only use it a couple times a year. The sister would go up every weekend. So she worked at a bank down here in Salt Lake, but then every weekend she was up staying at the cabin. Well, after a number of years of her using it weekly, basically, him using it from time to time throughout the year, she goes to him one day and says, hey, her husband had died too. I forgot that piece. And so she had changed her last name or something. I don't remember what the deal was, but there was something with her name that she wanted changed. So she had gone to the title company, who she had a friend that owns a title company, went to him. He made up a quitclaim deed. She took it to her brother and said, hey, I'm changing how my name is on title. I just need you to sign this deed so that I can change my name. Well, he didn't pay attention to what he was signing, just signed it, hands it back to her, and she goes and records it. Then a few months later, she comes to him and says, hey, I'm thinking I want to sell the cabin. How do you feel about it? And he said, yeah, well, we don't really use it that much, so that's fine if you want to sell it. She says, great. And by the way, and I don't know that she said this by the way part, but he then found out when he signed the quitclaim deed, he also signed it taking it from joint tenancy to tenants in common, to where she owned 2/3 of the cabin and he owned now 1/3, from 50-50. So she said, so I want to sell the cabin. And so anyway, they ended up getting attorneys involved. They call me and say, will you come and help us sell the cabin? Oh, I was going to tell you another part of the story, but maybe I shouldn't. Anyway, well, I'll tell you, because Douglas is going to come and ask me anyway, but it involves him. So I wasn't going to tell you.
Awkward.
This was a referral from my sister-in-law, who, when she called me, said, there's going to be a lot of problems, so we're calling you instead of Douglas. Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, we're good. But if you know her, it's like not surprising.
Yeah,
Because then-
that's true.
Because then later on, we helped the same guy sell his current house and move in with them into a different property. And she still told him, we just don't trust Douglas. And he's like, you just do it and then let her think that I'm helping you the whole time.
That is true, actually.
So it's like, yeah, whatever. I'm not offended because it's her.
So anyway, but she calls me and says, because of how long you've been in the business and there's attorneys involved, we think you need to be doing it. And I was like, okay, so I did it. But here's the point of the story though. So it's time to list the property. I run the CMA. I tell them I think it's going to sell around 380. The sister though says, no, it's worth like 430 or so. I don't remember what she said, but it's 420, 430, something like that. So I just did this. But not only did I explain this, because I knew of the issues where I was having to talk to both attorneys, his attorney and hers, because they were suing, he was suing her, trying to get 50% of this cabin when it sold, and which was crazy. They like ended up with some weird thing where like she got 7/12 of, she owned 7/12 of the property and he owned it 5/12 is what they ascended on or landed on. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but at the end of the day, we had to talk to all these attorneys. Well, I knew going into it, part of this too was she had an agent she wanted to use, and they obviously wanted to use me, and she owned 7/12. So technically she should have been able to make the decision, but they agreed to interview her agent. She agreed to interview with me. I sat down with her. I explained all of this to her. Here's the other thing that's good about being with Everest, by the way. is part of what her excuse was of why she wanted to use this other agent is because their real estate office was up there and they know the market better. Well, luckily I was able to go pull up all the properties that had sold in Big Cottonwood Canyon. And I looked at both listing side or seller side. Guess who the number one company in terms of solds up there was? Everest. So even though I was able to go and say, yeah, they might have their office there, but look at all these properties. We were either on the buy side or the list side of almost half of the properties that had sold up there, so that gave us some credibility. But just knowing she really didn't want to use me, but agreed to, I actually put this on an addendum to the listing agreement that we would list the property at her price. But then after 3 weeks, if we had no showings and no offers, we would reduce it by, I said 7% is what I just put in the agreement. And then I said, if we've had some showings, 1 to 3, we'll reduce it by 5%. Well, her attorney calls me and I want to know how this guy ever even passed law school, because he called me, here, no lie, this is what he said to me.
That's not nice to say about Sam.
I know. Here's what this guy said though when he called me. He said, hey, I saw your addendum that you put to the listing agreement and we're not doing that. And I was like, you're not going to reduce the price 7%? And he goes, do you realize what could happen if nobody ever comes and makes an offer on the property? We could get this price down to like $30,000 or $40,000. And I was like, okay. Yeah, like I wanted to say that. I'm like, are you serious?
That just fell out of my head.
But I wanted to be like, are you serious? Like, there is no way if we listed the cabin up there for $30,000, what's going to happen? We're going to end up with 5,000 offers that drive the price up to where it should be. So I finally just said, here's the good news. Here's what he said. So we're not going to do that. Here's what we'll do instead. If after 3 weeks you've had no showings and no offers, we'll reduce the price to, and he actually put the price. And then he said, and then if 3 weeks later it hasn't sold, we'll reduce the price to, and he put the price. And if after 3 weeks of that it doesn't sell, we'll reduce, like he actually put in the dates and the price we would go to, which actually worked better for me because now I don't even need to go get a price reduction signed. It's already in the agreement.
Sold.
Yeah, I didn't even have to ask when the property hadn't sold. I didn't even have to ask. I just went and changed the price automatically, which was beautiful. And so it worked out great. And we ended up selling it actually very close. I think I said 385 and we sold it for like 395 or something is what I recommended. But here's my point. Don't be afraid to even put this in an addendum to the listing agreement with your seller of this is what we're going to do, the process we're going to follow. Because at the end of the day, doing the CMA is an art. It's not a science. And it's your best guess, and it could go either direction. But by having this put in there, and at least at a minimum, having the discussion with the seller and explaining this, then when you can call and say, okay, here's what's happened. I actually have a property listed right now that's in a 55 plus community that I did exactly this. Just yesterday, I called up the seller and said, look, we listed it at 310. We have had a ton of showings. We've had one offer, but the offer was significantly lower and they wouldn't come up. So I said, based on what we're looking at, we need to reduce we've been getting considerable number of showings. We need to reduce it 5%. We were listed at 310. We are down to 295. Hopefully that will do it. It should, based on what I'm telling you guys, but time will tell and we'll see. So anyway, okay. Now questions. All right. Well, thank you for being here. And Thursday's class is, so Thursday will be same time, 10 o'clock and part of the 12-hour new agent thing is going to be the buyer packet. So we're going to do like what we did last Thursday, but going through the buyer paperwork and talking about how to fill it out and all that kind of stuff. So, okay. Thanks, guys.
Boy, it feels so much smarter.
Do you?
No.
No, he's still.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ross.
Let's go 359.
He's still going to do 359.
Oh, my.
I have a question. Are you